Hi guys. Okay, so this one video is going to bring us up to date where we're at now. 38 to 40. I'm not 40 yet, I'll be 40 in August. So I'm going to title this, Will I Get Any Better? This is going to be quite a long rambling one, I'm afraid, because it is very fresh and in my mind at the moment what's going on in my life at the moment. And I'm not feeling very good today. I've got a chest infection and started on antibiotics, so excuse the breathing. I'll try and edit it as best as possible. Right, after my hospital admission, I set out to learn about what had happened. I gave up smoking, done everything I could to feel better. I determined that I'd been sat in a dark place waiting to get better for long enough. I'd nearly lost my life and hadn't even considered that as a possibility with this disease. Reading up on lung issues and drug complications with rheumatoid arthritis and immune suppression, I learnt how RA could affect the lungs and heart and become a terminal condition. I was shocked and incredibly grateful that my lungs were only damaged by the methotrexate and would improve once I was off the drug, right? Of course, stopping the methotrexate also meant it was going to take longer to gain control of the disease. The sulfasalazine, like the hydroxychloroquine, didn't seem to have any impact on the pain and swelling. But then I had no improvement whilst on the methotrexate either, and that was trying to kill me. So I continued taking these two drugs as they were the least damaging in terms of side effects, even though they didn't seem to work. The Embrel injections were different though. Within a few weeks I started to notice more range of motion in my joints. Like at the moment my shoulders are that stiff that I actually can't raise my arms or move my arms in any certain direction. But that sort of started loosening up. It wasn't as drastic as a miracle cure or anything like that, but it was. I was feeling more mobility in my joint. The longer I could take it, the more the swelling reduced. It wasn't a cure, it didn't just go away, and I didn't jump up and start running around like normal again. It was just enough relief to start being able to use the aids and adaptations around the house, like my walker, the bath lift. I could actually use the bath lift to get in and out of the bath quite comfortably on my own at that point, because I had more range of motion, whereas now, even with the bath lift, I need help getting up and down the stairs. I need help with all sorts of horrible things, like getting my bra on and off. I was more like mobile around the house. I was no longer permanently bedbound, but I was still housebound. The main problem was the infections. Again, I was immune suppressed on this drug, and again the repeated infections began and grew in duration and intensity. When taking these medications, you have to stop taking them at the first signs of infection, and whilst taking antibiotics until all signs of infection are clear. The injections were weekly, so you think, okay, miss one injection, take antibiotics for the week, then restart the injections, right? In theory that sounds okay. The reality is very different. These drugs and this disease do not work according to what you want it to do or how you expect it to be. And these drugs take a while to build up in your system. Infections are not very interested in your calendar or plans. In fact, most of mine seem to fall at the weekend, so I would not be able to see a doctor for 3 days, like 3 days into the infection before I got to see a doctor, so I would be like really ill by that time, because unfortunately they take hold rapidly, get very dangerous. They always fall at the weekend like this. It's bank holiday weekend and I've got a chest infection, but luckily I've got antibiotics at home, an emergency pack of antibiotics at home, so I've been able to start them without seeing a doctor. Obviously this was back then and we didn't know how bad I was and how much I would need that. If I got really bad over these weekends, I'd have to go into the hospital, which I tend to leave until I know I really won't survive if I don't go in. The infection issue started brewing by the Christmas, by which time the Embrel injections had helped me lose 5 of my 16 stone at the time. So I'd gone down to about 11.5 stone, but that was last year. I had begun moving around the house more freely. I also had a more determined and positive attitude. I fully believe a positive attitude is beneficial when fighting any disease. However, when people have said to me, oh, just be more positive and it will all be okay, well, no. Not in those darkest, most painful months. It's not possible to fake that all the time and just pretend like you're not in pain. You can't just put on a positive outlook at that point and make it all better. That's bullshit, sorry, but it is. It's not always possible to smile through the pain. Whilst on the Embrel injections, I can't say I was in any remission, but it certainly took the edge off and made me feel less worthless and less of a burden on my family. I viewed life in a whole new way. I can honestly say I really knew how lucky I was for every small positive in life. I couldn't do many of the crafts I used to be able to do. My hands have been the longest, hardest, most debilitating part of my disease. Because even without using my legs, if I could just use my hands, I use 2 ergo-handled walking sticks to support my legs, but the crippling effect it has on my hands and upper body makes me uneager to use them. But I love to craft and create. I'd been feeding my creativity watching YouTube videos. My daughter and I learnt how to make bath bombs together, and then slime. I was definitely improving because I was eager to create. The injections increased my mobility so that I was able to stay alert, and if taken slowly, the length of time I could be active was increasing. It's strange because my desire for where I wanted life to take me was up till this point that we would treat the RA with all these new expensive drugs, and then as my symptoms improved I'd begin diet and exercise regimes and get into a remission, maybe go back and finish my degree. That was all what I was thinking. Yes, maybe I can get better and I can go back to living a life and fulfilling my destiny and achieving in life. And yeah, obviously things haven't quite worked out that way. The Embrel helped, but it became clear that a full remission was actually highly unlikely. Well, I realised then I had to accept the RA. I think up until then I'd been like through the denial, through the anger, through the crying and like mourning my old body, and at this point I finally got to the point where I was like, no, this is the new me. I can't go back to my old body, and I can only go forward with my new body, accept my limitations, but live and love and appreciate all I have got. I tried so hard at this time to not mention my pain as much, to stop posting everything to Facebook. I realised nobody had wanted to hear it. That's why they stopped asking. It was a depressing reality for me, so it must have been depressing to hear it for others. I learnt how to smile and say, hi, I'm okay, how are you? It's easier that way. And I take the kindness offered by anyone who cares to ask. So my creative side was finally getting to play. I learnt to make soap and I fell in love with the craft. Thanks to the technology of a stick blender, I realised that if I was careful and didn't push myself too hard, I could create soap without strain on my joint. It was like a moment of heaven. I was finally feeling capable that I could be useful even if I wasn't particularly attractive. Someone will know what I mean when I say that. If he can't find you attractive, at least he should find you useful, right? It also meant I could make gifts for family and friends. I've never had the money to buy people gifts, but I get a lot of pleasure gifting my creations. No matter how painful my disease ever gets out, I would not give in to it and stop creating. My mental health was so greatly improved that it's worth it. I just create when I can and rest when I can't. We got to Christmas and I even managed the dinner with the kids all helping and no dad making things difficult, as is normal for our family Christmases. We have a long history of horrible Christmases, and in spite of my health being the worst ever, it was a good Christmas. I was really very happy. The new year rolled in and the monthly chest infections, antibiotic treatments had begun increasing. It'd take longer to get over them. I'd have to have 2 or 3 courses of antibiotics. I was doing like 3 weeks of the month without Embrel injections, and of course by the 3rd week you're fully back into RA flare. I mentioned it, my lungs not being right, at every medical appointment, and to anyone who'd listened. I made 2 or 3 new friends who were good, caring people. I started to realise I was complaining more again. Thing is, the longer I'd be sick, the less injections I could have. Plus, having an infection always seems to flare my symptoms. I use flare dubiously, as I would say my RA has not behaved in a flare and remission kind of way. It's just been one long, massively painful flare. It's either painful and exhausting or totally crippling and killing me. It's never... Yeah, even with the Embrel injections, the RA was still very prevalent. It was just the edge was taken off, you know. I know from research that I'm not the only RA patient to have had it to this extent. Basically, when they say a manifestation is rare and highly unlikely, it always seems to happen with me. It's not the 1 in a million that I would have liked to have been, you know. I'd love someone to say that you're 1 in a million and it's not because of my health reasons. It's not fun. I know I'm rambling a lot, but this is my reality. We are discussing what happened and is happening right now, how my life has been affected by this over the last couple of years, and you know, I have to ramble a bit, and I'm really sorry about that, but that is very much my nature. It's still a rambling mess in my own head. So the reduction in symptoms all came crashing back down on me. It almost felt worse as I watched my mobility fall away before I'd even gotten truly mobile. I began spending more days in bed, unable to move. By July, my chest was so bad. Only a few weeks before the July, my roomie nurse had been so excited to see my improvements in my joints and had offered me a job in the department. Admittedly, I knew I wasn't quite ready for work yet, but I knew something, because I definitely knew something wasn't right at that point. I knew my lungs were bad, and I'd like mentioned it, and they'd sent me for lung function tests just previous to this. They didn't reveal much, possibly because the last ones were taken when my lungs were bad back in 2014. So, you know, it's not, yeah, it was, my lungs are bad on each of my lung function tests. They're not declining, but they're staying sort of bad. Anyway, by the July my chest was raging, the nebulizer wasn't controlling it, and weeks of antibiotics and high-dose steroids were not helping. All my lung meds were not doing a thing. Respiratory crisis came. My son passed me a virus and had worried that he felt so poorly and knew it would really hit me hard. Oh boy, did it. Of course it landed at the weekend, and I delayed till Monday morning, hoping my GP would treat without hospital admission. My O2 was dropping, like my oxygen levels on my oximeter was dropping to 83 and 84, and my pulse was running over 160 per minute. Like it was travelling between 150 and 170 at times. So it was really, I was really not very well at all. I couldn't breathe enough to speak on the phone to the GP. He told me to call 999, but I refused and begged to call my mum instead. The GP knew my mum and knew she was probably more equipped to deal with my respiratory crisis than anyone. An ambulance would have panicked me more. I really don't handle public scenes very well at the best of times, so off to the hospital we went. My O2 was 84% on arrival, my pulse 137, my BP was crazy but I don't recall it exactly, and my CRP was 160 or something like that. My x-ray of my lungs showed shadows and scarring across all lobes of both lungs. The doctors looked worried and felt I had sepsis. I had so many injections and drips and tubes and masks, I must have looked truly scary for the first week. And in that first week, I made no improvements at all. My sputum sample showed no infection, which was what was expected. Yeah, because of the family history of blood clots, there was concerns of that being a possibility, so they done a CT scan. The dye didn't enter my system properly, because they didn't get the best view, unfortunately. My vein with the cannula in that they put the dye into, my vein exploded, and it was all pumping into my arm instead, which left a lovely mess. The write-up on the CT scan did not start well, with a typo missing in the sentence. The patient does, and it was meant to be not, but that was missing from the sentence. Patient does show signs of pulmonary embolism. Right, we worked out that it was meant to be does not show signs of pulmonary embolism, so I wasn't treated for it. It then went on to say that both lungs across all lobes showed diffuse ground glass opacities consistent with rheumatoid-associated interstitial lung disease. There were also some enlarged lymph nodes noted and some issues with my blood works. After this, I was put on a heavy-duty infusion of a bronchodilator and humidified oxygen at 4 litres, and after a week I started to improve and was eventually allowed home to be seen in the community by the respiratory team. I was taken off all my RA medications. Thing with these meds is that pretty much all of them can have a negative impact on the lungs, so we were now very limited with what I could take. Doctors have not made it clear to me how bad this disease can get, but my own research did scare the hell out of me at first. Rheumatoid arthritis, interstitial lung disease. It's so rare with such a high mortality rate that most diagnoses only come after death or not long before it. I think many lives are lost because of the infection issue. I feel like I'm constantly in fear of the next virus to come along, which is, I've just had, like, I realised last night that I've definitely got a virus chest infection coming on. As you can probably tell by my breathing. I'm 39 now, I'll be 40 in August, and I'm certain I will get there. After that, I don't know. I'm not dependent on oxygen yet, though I would feel much better if I had it available. I do feel grateful that I'm not that far advanced yet. My lungs did improve somewhat, but in all honesty, I know my body. I've always called it like I know what's going on inside of me. I can tell you where it's inflamed. I can tell you what my blood results will look like, and I know my lungs are not and have not been right since before I was even diagnosed. Now I have such a good knowledge of my body that I can tell what pain is rheumatoid, which is the fibro, which is the wheeze of asthma, the bubbling of a chest infection brewing, or the dry cough and crackling of the RA lung disease. I knew something was going wrong with my cervical spine, and my lumbar spine had been painful most of my life, but was definitely getting worse. Again, I was told it was very rare for RA to affect the spine, and on x-ray there was some spondylolisthesis and osteoclast around some of the vertebrae. It made sense as my neck swells grotesquely and the spasms from my spine were constant. The doctors called it degenerative. I would be unlikely to get much attention for this issue from rheumatology. I know it's RA because my spine swells as the rest of me does. Of course, all of this was currently out of control because I was on no RA medication at all. Indeed, that's how I'm certain that the RA is a problem in my lungs after the hospital admission. I was off all RA drugs for 6 months with just steroids and steroid shots to try and control the inflammation. My lungs didn't improve because I wasn't on any drugs. Now, after a lot of back and forth between rheumatology and pulmonary consultants on which meds would be okay, at first I thought, right, that's it, no more RA drugs for me, because they will kill me even if the RA don't. After a few months with the full force of the RA back, growing at a rate of half a stone a week, and I was literally begging them to start me on something. My pain meds were now increased to the maximum possible level, and I was still in agony and bedbound for the most part. I did have a renewed determination to push myself daily to my very limit, to try to create even though it hurts, and I save all my energy each day so I can take part in making dinner for my family. But the pain of RA is incredible. It really is fully debilitating. Ironically, the only drug in treatment of RA that was proven to have no detrimental effects on the lungs is rituximab or Rituxan infusions, which in this country and for rheumatoid arthritis it's only licensed in combination therapy with methotrexate. So here we were 2 years after my allergic reaction to this drug, making the decision that I must be re-challenged with it. I still can't believe I agreed to it, but the pain really does make you so desperate. I'm on a lower dose of methotrexate, taken orally once a week. It's not a fun drug at all. Just about every side effect you can imagine is pretty much expected for the majority of patients. The studies on the efficacy of rituximab show it to have a great rate of improvement in the majority of patients. Again, rarely, some small percent of patients may take it until the second round of infusions to show improvement. Well, we are nearly 3 months since the infusions, and I've been dutifully taking the methotrexate weekly for a month or so more. Alongside the infusions were large infusions of steroids, and I've had several 120mg methylprednisolone intramuscular injections in that time. The steroid shots last between 1 to 2 weeks for me, but they are meant to last for 3 months, and it's not a viable option on a permanent basis. I'm also still on oral prednisolone daily and seem unable to taper off at all. I had massive hope for this new medication and obviously took a massive risk with methotrexate in order to get the drug. I'm getting a bit frustrated now. I just wish these drugs would help me. My lungs are declining too. I just won't know how much till I hit a crisis again. I missed a bit actually, guys. I also, when I came out of hospital, I had a smear come back with dodgy cells, and I had to have a loop treatment of my cervix. It's just another little complexity, but I didn't want to miss out any details. That's up till right now. If my lungs just stay where they're at, I'm doing quite well. I'm not dependent on oxygen yet. Each time that I get a chest infection and my lungs decline, they don't get fully back to what they were before. I try so hard to avoid infections. But Grace said to me this morning, "Oh, you're not well, are you, Mum?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Yeah, my friends aren't well either. The friends that came round the other day, I get their infection before they've even known they've got it." That is where we're at. Rheumatoid arthritis, interstitial lung disease. Look that up on Facebook and you'll find my group. Much love to you all. Breathe easy, folks. Thanks for listening. See you later.